Nancy Rodriguez stood at the edge of the boat looking down into the crystal clear water. The Mediterranean sun warmed her shoulders as she adjusted her diving mask one last time. Below her, 85 meters of dark blue water waited. At 40 years old, she was at the top of her career as an underwater rescue diver. Newspapers called her the Angel of the Deep. She had saved 23 lives in her career. Each of those rescues was etched in her memory. The oil rig worker trapped under debris at 40 meters, the research team caught in an underwater cave system, the yacht captain who had fallen overboard in rough seas. Every rescue had reinforced her belief that she was invincible in the water. The ocean was her element, her home, her calling. The job today seemed routine. A research submarine had lost power at 70 meters. Two scientists were trapped inside, their oxygen running low. Nancy's team had 4 hours to reach them, attach emergency air tanks, and guide them to the surface. She had done similar rescues many times before. "Descending now," Nancy announced, and she rolled backward into the water. The first 20 meters were beautiful. Sunlight danced through the water, and small fish scattered as she descended. At 40 meters, the water grew darker, colder. Nancy checked her air gauge. Everything looked good. Her breathing was calm and controlled, just as it should be. She had made this descent hundreds of times. Her body knew what to do automatically. She reached the submarine at 72 meters. Working quickly, her gloved hands moving with practiced efficiency, she attached emergency air lines to the vessel's external ports. Inside, she could see the two scientists' faces pressed against the window. They looked scared but hopeful. One of them was crying. Nancy gave them a thumbs up, a gesture meant to say, "I am here. You are safe now. Help has arrived." That was when she noticed her air gauge. The needle was moving. Fast. Much faster than she should be losing air. Nancy felt the first flutter of concern in her chest. She tapped the gauge, thinking perhaps it was malfunctioning. But the needle continued its steady march toward zero. Nancy had maybe 10 minutes of air left, maybe less. Protocol was clear in this situation. Ascend immediately. Abort the mission. Get to safety. Let another team complete the rescue. But if she left now, the scientists might die before the backup team arrived. The emergency airlines needed another 5 minutes of work to be fully secured. 5 minutes she might not have. Nancy made her decision in that moment. She would finish the job. She had always finished the job. That was who she was. That was what made her the best. 4 minutes later, everything was secure. Every clamp checked, every seal tested. The scientist would survive now. Nancy gave them a final thumbs up and began her ascent. She checked her air gauge and felt her heart skip a beat. The needle sat on zero. Actually past zero, if that was possible. She was 85 meters below the surface and she had no air. Nancy tried to take a breath, but nothing came. Just the hollow sound of empty tank. She pulled the regulator from her mouth and began to swim upward, her lungs already burning. Training kicked in immediately. She could not hold her breath all the way to the surface. The pressure change would kill her. She needed to exhale slowly as she rose, releasing the expanding air from her lungs. But her body wanted to breathe. Every cell in her body screamed for oxygen. Nancy kicked hard, pulling herself upward through the dark water. 20 meters, 30 meters. Her vision began to blur at the edges. Her lungs felt like they were on fire, like someone had poured acid into her chest. Her movements became sluggish. The water felt thick, like swimming through honey. 40 meters, 50 meters. Nancy's arms and legs felt impossibly heavy. She wanted to stop swimming. She wanted to rest, just for a moment, just to close her eyes. A strange peace was settling over her, and somewhere in her training-fogged brain, she recognized this as a very bad sign. Her brain was shutting down from lack of oxygen. At 55 meters, she saw Marco, her partner, diving toward her from above. He must have noticed something was wrong on the monitors. He reached her and immediately shoved his backup regulator into her mouth. Air flooded her lungs. Sweet, beautiful, life-giving air. Nancy breathed deeply, once, twice, 3 times. The fog in her brain began to clear. Marco held her arms and looked into her eyes through his mask. She could see the fear in his expression, the relief, the concern. She nodded to show him she was okay, though her hands were shaking badly and her legs felt like rubber. Together, they ascended slowly, stopping at the required depths to avoid decompression sickness. At the surface, hands pulled Nancy onto the boat. She collapsed on the deck, gulping air, her whole body trembling uncontrollably. She could not stop shaking. Her teeth chattered. Tears streamed down her face, mixing with the salt water. "What happened down there?" the boat captain demanded, his voice tight with controlled panic. Nancy checked her tank with shaking hands. A thin crack ran along one seam, barely visible. It must have happened when she bumped against the submarine while working. Such a small crack, so insignificant looking, but it had nearly killed her. The scientists were rescued 3 hours later by another team. They survived. Nancy survived too, but something inside her had broken down there in the dark water. Something that would not heal easily. That night, Nancy sat in her apartment, unable to sleep. Her wet diving suit hung on the shower rod, dripping into the tub. The sound of the drips echoed through the quiet apartment. Drip, drip, drip. Like a countdown. Like her air running out. She tried to drink some tea, but her hands shook so badly that she spilled it on her lap. The hot liquid soaked through her pants, but she barely noticed. Every time she closed her eyes, she was back in the water, 85 meters down with no air. She could feel her lungs burning. She could see the darkness closing in. She could feel the terrible peace that had settled over her as her brain began to shut down. That moment when she had almost given up, almost stopped fighting, almost let the water take her.
The nightmares began that same night. Nancy would wake up gasping, convinced she was drowning. Sometimes she would sit up suddenly, clutching her throat, absolutely sure that she could not breathe. Her apartment felt too small, the air too thick. She would open all the windows and stand there in her pajamas, breathing deeply, reminding herself over and over that she was safe, that she was alive, that she could breathe. She tried to return to work 2 weeks later. Her boss was understanding, his face creased with genuine concern. "Take your time," he said, placing a paternal hand on her shoulder. "You have been through a trauma. These things need time to heal. Take a month. Take 2 months. Your job will be here." But Nancy had always been strong. She had always pushed through challenges. She thought she could push through this too. She was Nancy Rodriguez, the angel of the deep. She did not quit. She did not give up. Except this time, her body and mind had other plans.
Her first dive after the accident was only to 20 meters. An easy dive to check some underwater cables. Simple. Safe. Routine. Nancy descended slowly, checking her equipment every few seconds. Her hands moved over her gauges obsessively. Air pressure, depth, time. Air pressure again. Was it dropping? Was that crack there before? Is that a new sound from the regulator? At 15 meters, panic hit her like a physical blow. Her breathing became rapid and shallow. She could not get enough air. The regulator felt wrong in her mouth. She was sure her air was running out again. The numbers on the gauge did not matter. Her body knew. Her body remembered. She was drowning. She was dying. Not enough air, never enough air. Nancy shot to the surface, breaking several safety rules in her panic. On the boat, she sat shaking and crying, unable to explain what had happened. She could not find words. How do you explain that your body has betrayed you? That the water you once loved now terrified you? Marco sat beside her, his hand on her shoulder, not saying anything. He did not need to. His silence said everything. Nancy tried 3 more times over the following month. Each time was the same, or worse. She could not go deeper than 10 meters without the panic overwhelming her. The sensation of not being able to breathe became worse each time, more visceral, more real. Her body remembered what her mind tried to forget. The memory was in her cells, in her muscles, in her lungs. 6 weeks after the accident, Nancy walked into her boss's office and resigned. She loved diving. She loved rescue work. She loved being in the water, the weightlessness, the peace, the purpose, but she could not do it anymore. Her body and mind would not let her. I understand, her boss said quietly, his eyes sad. The offer stands if you ever change your mind. You are one of the best we have ever had. The best, maybe. Nancy nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She cleaned out her locker, looking at the photos she had taped inside the door. Photos of successful rescues, teams celebrating, award ceremonies, a life that now belonged to someone else. She said goodbye to Marco and the rest of the team and walked away from the only career she had ever wanted. For the next year, Nancy drifted. She had savings, so money was not an immediate problem, but she felt lost. Who was she if not a rescue diver? What was she supposed to do with her life now? Her identity had been completely wrapped up in her career. Without it, she did not know who she was. She tried different jobs. She worked at a bookstore for 3 months, surrounded by words about adventures she would never have again. She tried being a fitness instructor, using her diving fitness in a new way, but being around athletic people made her feel like a fraud. She even worked as a tour guide in a coastal city, though being near the water sometimes triggered her anxiety so badly she had to leave work early. Nothing felt right. Nothing filled the hole that diving had left in her life. Nancy also avoided the water. The ocean that she had once loved now frightened her. She moved away from the coast, finding an apartment in a city far from the sea, in the mountains where she could not even smell salt air. But the nightmares continued. At least once a week, sometimes more, she would wake up drowning, her lungs burning, darkness closing in. She saw a therapist. Dr. Sarah Chen was patient and understanding, with kind eyes and a gentle manner. What you are experiencing is post-traumatic stress disorder, Dr. Chen explained during their first session. Your brain is trying to protect you from a situation that nearly killed you. The panic you feel is a warning system. It worked perfectly when you were actually in danger, but now it is working overtime, seeing danger where none exists. Will it ever stop? Nancy asked, her voice small and tired. It can get better, Dr. Chen said carefully. With work and time and patience, it can get much better. But you may always have some level of anxiety around water and diving. The key is learning to manage it, not to make it disappear completely. Think of it like a fire alarm. We do not want to disable the alarm completely. We just want to teach it when to sound and when to stay quiet. What if I never want to dive again? Nancy asked. What if I just want to forget that part of my life? Dr. Chen looked at her thoughtfully. That is a valid choice. But I would encourage you to stay open to possibilities. Right now, today, you are not ready to dive. That is okay. But the Nancy of next year might feel differently. Do not close doors just because they feel impossible to open today.
Nancy worked with Dr. Chen for 6 months. The nightmares became less frequent, though they never disappeared completely. She learned breathing exercises to manage her anxiety. She learned to recognize the signs of a panic attack before it overwhelmed her. She learned that her trauma was not a weakness or a failure. It was a normal response to a terrifying, life-threatening event. Slowly, carefully, she began to heal. But Nancy still stayed away from the water. Dr. Chen suggested gradual exposure, starting with just being near the ocean, walking on the beach, sitting by a lake. Nancy was not ready. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The thought of being near water made her chest tight and her breathing shallow. 2 years after the accident, Nancy decided she needed a fresh start, a complete change. She looked at job listings in different countries, different climates, different environments. She was ready to leave everything behind and start completely new. Maybe she would move to the desert, maybe the mountains, somewhere dry, somewhere safe. Then she saw the advertisement. A small luxury hotel in a coastal town called Puerto Marina needed staff. They were hiring for various positions, including bellboy. The pay was decent, and the job included housing. Nancy almost skipped past it because it was by the ocean. Her finger hovered over the next listing. But something made her stop. She read more carefully. Porto Marina was a historic town on the Mediterranean coast. It was famous for its archaeological sites, Phoenician ruins, Roman temples, Byzantine churches. The town attracted scholars and researchers from around the world. The hotel, Bella Vista, was small but elegant. It catered to wealthy tourists and visiting academics. Nancy stared at the screen for a long time. A coastal town. A job by the sea. This was exactly what she had been avoiding for 2 years. But something about it called to her. Dr. Chen had said not to close doors. Maybe it was time to stop running. Maybe it was time to face her fear, even if just by living near the water again. She did not have to swim. She did not have to dive. Just be near it. Just prove to herself that the ocean had not won. She applied for the position. 2 weeks later, she had a video interview with the hotel manager, a woman named Sophia Rossi. Sophia was in her 60s, with sharp eyes, silver gray hair, and a warm smile that reached her eyes. "Your resume is interesting," Sophia said, looking at her screen with a slight frown of curiosity. "You were an underwater rescue diver. Very impressive credentials. Why do you want to work as a bellboy in a hotel?" Nancy had prepared for this question. "I am looking for a change," she said honestly. "I left diving 2 years ago for personal reasons. I have been trying different things, looking for what comes next. I enjoy working with people. I am physically fit and strong. I speak 3 languages fluently. I think I would be good at this job." Sophia studied her for a moment, her sharp eyes seeming to see more than Nancy wanted to reveal. "Can I ask what the personal reasons were?" "You do not have to answer if you do not want to." Nancy hesitated. Then she decided on honesty. If Sophia would not accept the truth, then this job was not right anyway. "I had an accident during a dive. I nearly drowned. I developed severe anxiety around diving after that. I cannot do the work anymore. I tried, but my body will not let me." Sophia nodded slowly, her expression softening. "And you want to work at a hotel by the sea?" "I need to stop running from water," Nancy said. "I need to prove to myself that I can be near the ocean without fear controlling my life. This job feels like a good step, a safe step, but still a step forward." Sophia smiled, and it was genuine and warm. "I like honest people. I like brave people too. Anyone who can admit their fears is brave in my book. Facing your fears takes more courage than pretending you have none. When can you start?" Nancy felt a wave of relief wash over her. 2 weeks? Perfect. Welcome to Bella Vista, Nancy. I think you will fit in well here. Nancy packed her small apartment, said goodbye to Dr. Chen with promises to stay in touch, and made the long journey to Porto Marina. As the bus wound down the coastal road and she caught her first glimpse of the Mediterranean Sea sparkling in the afternoon sun, her heart began to race. The old panic stirred in her chest, familiar and unwelcome. But Nancy took a deep breath and used the techniques Dr. Chen had taught her. Count to 4, breathing in. Hold for 4. Out for 4. She was here. She could do this. She would do this. One day at a time. The town of Porto Marina was beautiful in a way that made Nancy's breath catch. White buildings with red-tiled roofs clustered around a small harbor. Narrow cobblestone streets wound up the hillside, lined with shops selling local crafts and cafes with outdoor seating. Ancient stone walls and archways spoke of centuries of history. Fishing boats bobbed in the harbor, their paint bright and cheerful. Tourists walked along the waterfront, eating gelato and taking photos, their laughter carrying on the breeze. Bella Vista Hotel sat on a small cliff overlooking the sea, surrounded by gardens that smelled of lemon blossoms and rosemary. It was a converted 19th century villa, painted pale yellow with green shutters. The building had elegant proportions and beautiful details. A private path led down to a small beach below. The hotel had only 20 rooms, making it exclusive and intimate rather than overwhelming. Sophia met Nancy at the door with open arms. "Welcome, welcome," she said warmly, embracing Nancy like an old friend. "Come, I will show you everything." The hotel was elegant but comfortable. Rich wooden furniture polished to a deep glow. Soft carpets that muffled footsteps. Fresh flowers in every room, their scent delicate and pleasant. The lobby had tall windows that looked out over the sea. Nancy felt the familiar tightness in her chest when she saw the water, but she focused on Sophia's voice and kept her breathing steady. 4 inches. Hold 4, 4 out. "We have a small staff," Sophia explained as she showed Nancy around. "Antonio is our chef. His wife Maria handles housekeeping. Pietro works at the front desk. You will be our second bellboy. Our first bellboy, Luca, has been with us for 10 years. He will show you everything you need to know." Nancy's room was in the staff quarters, a small but comfortable space with a window overlooking the garden. She unpacked her few belongings and tried not to look at the sea beyond the flowers. But it was there, always there, blue and vast and terrifying. Luca turned out to be a cheerful man in his 30s with a quick smile, boundless energy, and an easy laugh. "Sophia says you used to be a diver," he said as he showed Nancy around on her first day. "That is impressive, really impressive. I cannot even swim very well. I stay on land where I belong." Nancy smiled, though it felt forced. "That was another life. I am just a bellboy now." "Hey, being a bellboy is a good life," Luca said enthusiastically. "We meet interesting people. We hear amazing stories. We get to work in a beautiful place. Not so bad, right?" Nancy found that Luca was right. The work was physical, but not difficult. She carried luggage up and down stairs, building strength in her legs and arms. She helped guests with their needs, learning to anticipate what they wanted before they asked. She gave directions to the best restaurants, the quietest beaches, the most interesting historical sites. She recommended activities and made reservations. She learned the rhythm of the hotel, the patterns of arrivals and departures, the preferences of regular guests who returned year after year. Working at Bella Vista was peaceful in a way Nancy had not experienced in years. She rose early with the sun, worked hard through the day until her muscles ached pleasantly, and fell into bed exhausted each night. The physical exhaustion helped. She was too tired for nightmares. The nightmares became less frequent, though they did not disappear entirely. Being near the water was hard at first. The first time Nancy had to walk past the beach below the hotel, her heart raced so fast she thought she might faint. Her vision tunneled. Her palms sweated, but she forced herself to keep walking, to not run away, to breathe through the panic. Gradually, it became easier. She started forcing herself to walk along the waterfront each morning before work, exposure therapy through sheer willpower. Some days she could only manage a few minutes before the anxiety became too strong and she had to retreat. Other days she could sit on a bench and watch the waves for half an hour, her breathing steady, her mind almost calm. She avoided the beach directly below the hotel. She avoided watching the diving boats that took tourists out to see underwater caves and grottos. She crossed the street when she passed the dive shop in town, not ready to see the equipment, smell the neoprene, hear the divers' excited chatter. But she was here, living by the sea, and that was progress. That was healing, slow and painful, but real. 6 months passed like water flowing, then a year. Nancy became good at her job, earning praise from guests who requested her specifically when they returned. She learned all the regular guests' names and preferences. She could recommend the best restaurants in town, matching each guest's preferences perfectly. She knew where to find the quietest beaches, the most interesting historical sites, the best gelato. Sophia was pleased with her work and told her so regularly. "You have been a wonderful addition to our staff," Sophia told her during her one-year review. "The guests like you. You are reliable and professional. You have a gift for making people feel welcome. I am giving you a raise." "Thank you," Nancy said, genuinely grateful. "I like it here. This feels like home now." And it did feel like home. Nancy had made friends with the other staff members. Antonio would save special dishes for her to try. Maria would share stories about her grandchildren. Pietro would practice his English with her during slow afternoons. She knew the shopkeepers in town by name. She had her favorite cafe where she had breakfast every morning, where the owner knew she liked her coffee strong and black. Her nightmares had decreased to once or twice a month, manageable now. The constant anxiety had faded to a dull awareness that lived in the background of her life, always there, but no longer overwhelming. She still had moments when the fear flared up bright and sharp, walking past the dive shop and catching a glimpse of tanks lined up inside, hearing a boat engine in the harbor that sounded like the one she had worked from, smelling the particular scent of marine diesel fuel mixed with salt air. In those moments, her breath would catch, her heart would race, and she would have to close her eyes and count to 10, reminding herself that she was safe, she was on land, she was okay. Then the moment would pass, and she would continue with her day. But overall, Nancy had found a kind of peace in Porto Marina. It was not the life she had planned. She was not saving lives or doing important rescue work. She was not pushing her limits or proving her courage. But she was healing slowly and steadily. And that mattered too. Maybe it mattered most of all. Then, in the spring of her second year in Porto Marina, everything changed. A booking came through for 10 rooms. Sophia called all the staff together in the dining room to discuss it. "We have a very special group coming next month," Sophia announced, her eyes bright with excitement. 10 archaeologists from various institutions around the world. They are leading experts in ancient Mediterranean cultures. They are coming to conduct research on some newly discovered sites near Porto Marina. They will be staying with us for 2 weeks. Luca whistled appreciatively. 10 rooms for 2 weeks. That is good business. "It is," Sophia agreed. "But we need to be at our best. These are important people. Some of them are quite famous in academic circles. They have chosen our hotel specifically because of our reputation. We need to make sure their stay is perfect. No mistakes, no problems. Everything must be excellent."
Nancy felt a flutter of excitement mixed with nervousness. She loved talking with the archaeologists who occasionally stayed at the hotel. Their passion for history was infectious. 10 of them staying for 2 weeks. It would be fascinating, but also pressure. She wanted to do well. She wanted to make Sophia proud. Sophia distributed a list of the guests' names with their credentials. Nancy scanned it and recognized a few names from articles she had read. Dr. James Morrison, a British expert on Phoenician culture who had written several influential books. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a Spanish marine archaeologist who had discovered an important shipwreck off the coast of Sardinia. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, a Japanese specialist in ancient trade routes who had revolutionized understanding of how goods moved around the ancient Mediterranean. The list went on, each name representing someone at the top of their field, someone who had dedicated their life to understanding the past. They will arrive on the 15th of next month, Sophia said. I want everything ready. Fresh flowers in every room, the best linens. Antonio, prepare to show off your skills. They will want good meals after long days of research.
Antonio grinned, already planning menus in his head. They will eat like kings and queens. I will make dishes their grandchildren will hear stories about. Over the next 3 weeks, the staff prepared for the arrival of the archaeological team. Rooms were cleaned until they sparkled, every surface polished. Gardens were trimmed and weeded until they looked like something from a magazine. Pietro created information packets about local restaurants, transportation options, and historical sites. Nancy and Luca practiced their coordination for handling multiple guests efficiently, timing themselves carrying luggage up the stairs, planning the most efficient routes. Nancy found herself feeling nervous, but excited. This felt important somehow, though she could not explain why. It was just a group of hotel guests, after all. She had handled many guests over the past 2 years. But something about this felt different, significant. Like something was going to happen, though she had no idea what. The archaeologists arrived on a sunny Sunday afternoon in April. Their plane had landed in the nearest city, and they had hired a private bus to bring them to Porto Marina. Nancy and Luca stood outside the hotel as the bus pulled up, dressed in their crisp uniforms, ready to help with luggage and make excellent first impressions. The first person off the bus was a tall woman in her 50s, with gray hair pulled back in a neat bun. She wore practical khaki clothes, expensive hiking boots, and had the sun-weathered skin of someone who spent most of their time outdoors. Dr. Elena Vasquez, Nancy remembered from the list, the marine archaeologist who explored underwater ruins. "Welcome to Bella Vista," Sophia called out cheerfully, coming down the steps to greet them. "I hope you had a pleasant journey."
Long but good, Dr. Vasquez replied with a warm smile that transformed her serious face. Thank you for having us. We are very excited about the work ahead. This area is incredibly rich in archaeological sites. We could spend years here and only scratch the surface. The other archaeologists emerged from the bus one by one, stretching after the long ride. They were a diverse group, ranging in age from early 30s to late 60s, from various countries and backgrounds. But they all shared a certain energy, an excitement that was almost childlike. They looked at the hotel, at the town below, at the sea beyond, with eyes full of curiosity and wonder. They were people who still found joy in discovery, still felt awe at touching history. Nancy and Luca worked quickly and efficiently, unloading luggage from the bus and carrying it to the correct rooms. The archaeologists were friendly and grateful, making Nancy's job easy. They said please and thank you. They did not complain about stairs or heat. They tipped generously. Nancy found herself smiling as she worked, caught up in their enthusiasm. Dr. James Morrison, a British man in his 60s with a shock of white hair and bright blue eyes, paused to look at the view from the hotel lobby. Magnificent, he breathed, his accent cultured and precise. Just magnificent. This town has witnessed 3,000 years of human history. Every stone, every wall, every cobblestone has a story to tell. We are surrounded by ghosts, but friendly ghosts. The ghosts of people who lived and loved and worked and dreamed, just like us. You will find plenty of stories here, Nancy told him as she carried his suitcase up the stairs. Porta Marina has layers upon layers of history. Sometimes when they dig to put in new water pipes, they find Roman pottery or Byzantine coins. I can sense that, Dr. Morrison said, following her up the stairs. The very air here feels ancient, does it not? Heavy with memory, rich with the accumulated lives of thousands of people stretching back into the mists of time. Nancy smiled. She had never thought about it that way, but yes, she supposed he was right. There was something special about Porta Marina. something that made you feel connected to the past in a visceral way. Once all the guests were settled in their rooms, Sophia invited them to gather in the hotel's dining room for welcome drinks and appetizers. Antonio had prepared a beautiful spread of local delicacies: fresh mozzarella and tomatoes drizzled with olive oil, prosciutto sliced so thin it was almost transparent, olives marinated in herbs, grilled vegetables, fresh bread still warm from the oven, wine from a local vineyard. The archaeologists mingled enthusiastically, chatting about their upcoming research. Nancy served drinks and listened to their conversations, fascinated. They talked about ground penetrating radar surveys that could see underground without digging. They discussed stratigraphy, the way layers of soil could be read like pages in a book. They debated the best methods for carbon dating and artifact preservation. They argued cheerfully about theories of ancient trade routes and cultural exchanges. Their passion was contagious. Even their disagreements were friendly, driven by genuine curiosity rather than ego. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, a petite Japanese woman in her 50s with sharp, intelligent eyes behind stylish glasses, struck up a conversation with Nancy as she refilled her glass of wine. "Have you lived in Porto Marina long?" Dr. Tanaka asked, her English precise and barely accented. "Almost 2 years," Nancy replied. "I moved here from northern Italy." "And what do you think of the town's history? Does it interest you?" "Very much," Nancy said honestly. "I have been reading about it since I arrived." The layers of civilization here are amazing. Phoenician traders, Roman conquerors, Byzantine merchants, medieval craftsmen, all in one small place. Sometimes I look at a wall and think about all the hands that have touched those stones over the centuries. Dr. Tanaka looked pleased, her eyes lighting up. "You have a good understanding." A historian's heart. Many people see old stones and think nothing of them, just old buildings. But you see the people behind the stones. That is the key to archaeology. We are not just studying objects. We are studying human lives, human choices, human dreams and fears. Nancy had never thought about it that way, but Dr. Tanaka was right. "I never considered myself particularly interested in history before," Nancy admitted. "But being here has changed that. There is something about living in a place where so many people have lived before you. It makes you think about time differently, about how small our individual lives are in the grand scheme of things, but also how important, because we are all part of this long chain of human experience." Dr. Tanaka nodded enthusiastically. "Exactly. You understand perfectly. Place has power. Being in a location where important events happened, where thousands of people lived and died and loved and struggled, it can awaken something in us. A connection to the past, a curiosity about the people who walked the same streets we walk, looked at the same sea we look at, felt the same sun on their faces." Nancy nodded, thinking about this. She had come to Porto Marina to escape her past, to heal from her trauma. But instead, she had found herself drawn into a much older past, into the stories of people long dead. It gave her own struggles a different perspective. She was just one person in a long chain of human experience stretching back thousands of years. Others had suffered, survived, and found meaning in their lives. Others had faced fears and overcome them. Others had been broken and rebuilt themselves. She was not unique. She was part of the eternal human story. And somehow, that was comforting. Over the next few days, Nancy observed the archaeologists' routine and learned more about each of them. They rose early, just as the sun was coloring the sky pink and gold. They ate a quick breakfast, fueling up for the day ahead. Then they headed out to their various research sites in rented vans, carrying equipment and cameras and notebooks. They returned in the late afternoon, tired and dusty, but energized, full of stories about what they had discovered that day. In the evenings, they gathered in the hotel dining room, sharing their findings over Antonio's excellent meals, debating theories, and planning the next day's work. Nancy listened when she could, fascinated by their work. Dr. Vasquez was leading a team surveying underwater sites, using sonar and diving to map ancient structures beneath the waves. Dr. Morrison was excavating a Phoenician burial ground on the hillside above town, where wealthy traders had been laid to rest 3,000 years ago. Dr. Tanaka was analyzing ancient pottery fragments found throughout the region, tracing trade routes by matching the chemical composition of clay to specific locations. Each archaeologist had their own specialty, their own piece of the vast puzzle they were trying to solve. One evening, Nancy overheard Dr. Vasquez talking about a potential underwater site, and her hands clenched around the water pitcher she was holding. The locals say there are ruins about 2 kilometers offshore, Dr. Vasquez explained to her colleagues, pointing to a map spread on the table. Old stone columns that you can see when the water is very clear. They might be from a Roman port facility that sank during an earthquake in the 4th century. The earthquake of 365 AD, probably. We have historical records of it. It destroyed cities all around the Mediterranean. Nancy felt her chest tighten painfully. Underwater ruins. That would require diving to explore properly. Deep diving, probably. She quickly excused herself and went to refill water glasses at another table, trying to push away the anxiety that had suddenly flooded through her system. But later that night, lying in bed, unable to sleep, Nancy found herself thinking about those underwater ruins. Part of her wanted to know more. What had once been up there in the sunlight, used by living people? What stories did those stones hold? What would it be like to swim through those ancient structures, to touch walls that had not been touched in over 1,500 years? But the larger part of her felt only fear. Just thinking about diving made her heart race and her breathing shallow. She pressed her hand to her chest, trying to slow her heartbeat, trying to calm herself. She forced herself to use her breathing techniques, counting slowly to 10 and back again, reminding herself that she was safe in her bed far from the water. Eventually, she fell into a restless sleep, but her dreams were troubled, filled with dark water and stone columns that reached up like grasping hands. The archaeologists settled into a productive routine. Every morning, they headed out to their various sites. Every evening, they returned with new discoveries and theories. Nancy learned their individual preferences and quirks. Dr. Morrison liked his coffee strong and black, and he always had a second cup. Dr. Vasquez preferred tea in the afternoons, Earl Grey with just a touch of honey. Dr. Tanaka was vegetarian and appreciated that Antonio remembered this without being reminded. Dr. Chen, an American archaeologist specializing in burial practices, had a nut allergy and needed to know the ingredients in everything. The hotel staff became used to their patterns. Antonio learned to have coffee ready exactly when they would stumble down for breakfast. Pietro knew who needed wake-up calls and who preferred sleeping in when they had a rare morning off. Nancy and Luca knew who needed help carrying equipment and who preferred to manage their own things, who liked to chat during luggage transport, and who preferred quiet. Nancy found herself particularly drawn to conversations with Dr. Sarah Chen, the American archaeologist who, coincidentally, had the same name as Nancy's former therapist. This Dr. Chen was in her 40s, with warm eyes and an easy manner. She specialized in studying how ancient cultures dealt with trauma and grief, examining burial practices and memorial rituals to understand how people processed loss. Every culture has developed ways of processing loss and pain, Dr. Chen explained to Nancy one evening as Nancy cleared away dinner dishes. The Romans had elaborate funeral rituals that lasted days. The Phoenicians built monuments to the dead that would last millennia. These were not just ceremonies, they were psychological tools. They helped people move through grief and back into life. They gave meaning to suffering. They honored the dead while allowing the living to continue. Do you think modern people have lost some of that? Nancy asked, genuinely curious. She lingered by the table, a tray of dishes balanced on her hip, wanting to hear more. In some ways, yes, Dr. Chen said thoughtfully. We have therapy and medication, which are valuable. I am not dismissing modern approaches, but we have lost some of the communal aspects of healing, the shared rituals that helped entire communities process tragedy together, the sense of being part of something larger than ourselves. Ancient people understood that suffering is universal, that we all face loss and pain. Their rituals acknowledge that. She paused, looking at Nancy thoughtfully with eyes that seemed to see more than Nancy wanted to reveal. Forgive me if this is too personal, but you have the look of someone who has experienced loss. Not death loss, perhaps, but some kind of significant loss. Am I wrong? Nancy was surprised by the observation, caught off guard. Not loss exactly, she said carefully, setting down her tray. But trauma, yes. A serious accident a few years ago. It took away my career, my identity, everything I thought I was. Dr. Chen nodded, unsurprised. I thought so. You carry it in your eyes. A certain cautiousness. A way of holding yourself like you are always prepared for something to go wrong. But also strength. Deep strength. You survived whatever happened, and you are still here, still functioning, still building a life. That takes remarkable resilience. Some days that feels like enough, Nancy said quietly, more honestly than she had intended. Just surviving, just getting through each day without falling apart. Other days, I wonder what I'm supposed to do with survival. Just keep surviving? Forever? What is the point? Dr. Chen leaned forward, her expression intense and compassionate. That is the question, is it not? The question that has haunted humans for thousands of years. In my research, I have found that ancient cultures understood something important. Survival alone is not enough. We must find meaning in our survival. Purpose. A reason to have made it through. The Romans believed that surviving trauma gave you wisdom that must be shared. The ancient Greeks thought that suffering could be transformed into something beautiful through art and story. Every culture had ways of helping survivors transform their pain into purpose. Nancy thought about this conversation long after it ended, lying in her bed that night staring at the ceiling. Find meaning in survival. Find purpose. But what was her purpose now? She was a bellboy in a hotel, a job she did well, but that did not particularly fulfill her soul. She had survived her accident, overcome her trauma enough to live near the water again without constant panic. But was that enough? Was just existing enough? The questions troubled her, circling in her mind like birds looking for a place to land. But she had no answers. Not yet. On the 10th day of the archaeologist's on stay, Dr. Vasquez made an exciting announcement at dinner. The whole group was gathered around a long table, tired from a full day of work, but energized by discovery. We have confirmed the underwater site, she said, her eyes shining with barely contained excitement. We did a preliminary survey with sonar equipment today. There are definitely structures down there. Columns, foundations, what might be a breakwater. The sonar images are clear. This could be the Roman port that was destroyed in 363 AD. It is an incredibly significant find. It could tell us so much about Roman maritime trade in this region. The other archaeologists congratulated her enthusiastically, raising their wine glasses in toast. Sophia brought out champagne to celebrate. Nancy poured glasses, her hands steady, despite the anxiety churning in her stomach, listening to the excited chatter. When will you dive to investigate more closely? Dr. Morrison asked, his face eager as a child's on Christmas morning. We are planning a more thorough survey next week after we finish our current land-based work, Dr. Vasquez said. We will need to bring in specialized equipment, additional divers. But we have been discussing possibly doing a preliminary dive before we leave, just to get a visual confirmation and some photographs, to see with our own eyes what we have found. That sounds wonderful, Dr. Tanaka said. I would love to see underwater ruins. Such a different perspective than what we see on land. To swim through a Roman port, to imagine the ships that once docked there, the sailors who once walked those stones now covered by water and time. Dr. Vasquez looked around the table, an idea clearly forming in her mind. Actually, I have been thinking. What if we organized a boat trip for all of us? A day trip, this coming Sunday. We could visit the site together. Those who dive can go down and look at the ruins. The rest can snorkel or just enjoy being on the water. It would be a nice break from our intense work schedule, a chance to relax together and celebrate our progress. The suggestion was met with immediate enthusiasm. Everyone started talking at once, planning and excited. Sunday was their last day before they began wrapping up their research to leave. A group outing on the sea sounded perfect. A chance to bond as a team, to celebrate their discoveries, to create memories together. I can arrange a boat, Sophia offered, already mentally going through her contacts. I know a good captain here in town. Captain Giuseppe, His boat is large enough for all of you, and he knows these waters like the back of his hand. He has been sailing here for 30 years. Perfect, Dr. Vasquez said, clapping her hands together. Let us make it official then. This Sunday, we have a boat trip. Everyone invited. Nancy felt her stomach drop, that familiar sensation of the ground disappearing beneath her feet. A boat trip. She would need to help coordinate it as part of her job. She would need to see them off, make sure they had everything they needed, probably help load supplies. But the thought of being near boats, near diving equipment, made her heart race. Images flashed through her mind unbidden. Dark water, no air, burning lungs, darkness closing in. Over the next few days, Sophia made the arrangements with her characteristic efficiency. Captain Giuseppe, a friendly local man in his 50s, with a weathered face and kind eyes, was hired. His boat, the Maria Stella, was a sturdy tourist vessel painted blue and white that could comfortably hold 20 people. Pietro created detailed information sheets about what to bring, what to wear, safety guidelines. Antonio prepared plans for a special picnic lunch for the group, mentally selecting the best cheeses and freshest vegetables. Nancy helped with the preparations, trying to ignore the growing anxiety in her chest that felt like a stone getting heavier and heavier. It is just a boat trip, she told herself repeatedly. You do not have to go on the boat. You just have to help them prepare and see them off. That is all. Just wave goodbye from the dock. You will be safe on land. But the nightmares returned that week with a vengeance. Twice Nancy woke up gasping, convinced she was drowning, tangled in her sheets that felt like water pulling her down. She used all her breathing techniques, all her coping strategies, all the tools Dr. Chen had taught her. But the old fear had been awakened by all this talk of diving and underwater sights. The trauma had been sleeping, but now it was awake and demanding attention. On Saturday evening, the night before the boat trip, Nancy could not sleep at all. She lay in bed watching shadows move across her ceiling, listening to the distant sound of waves against rocks. She kept thinking about the dive she had done 2 years ago, the submarine, the trapped scientist looking at her with terrified hope, the cracked air tank, the desperate swim toward the light, Marco's regulator in her mouth saving her life at the last possible moment. And she thought about what Dr. Chen, the archaeologist, not the therapist, had said. Find meaning in your survival. Find purpose. What was her purpose? Why had she survived? What if something happened on the boat trip tomorrow? The thought came unbidden and would not leave. What if there was an emergency? What if the weather turned bad? Nancy tried to push the thought away, telling herself she was being irrational, paranoid, letting her trauma make her see danger where none existed. Nothing was going to happen. The forecast showed clear weather. Captain Giuseppe had been taking tourists out in his boat for 20 years without serious incident. Dr. Vasquez was an experienced marine archaeologist who had done hundreds of dives. Everything would be fine. But Nancy could not shake. Sunday morning dawned bright and clear, the sky a perfect blue without a single cloud. Nancy woke late, having overslept her alarm after her restless night. She dressed quickly in her work clothes, splashed cold water on her face to wake herself up, and hurried to the hotel lobby. The archaeologists were already gathering there, excited and chatty, wearing swimming clothes under light shirts and sundresses, carrying towels and bags, applying sunscreen, and adjusting hats. Sophia was coordinating everything with her usual efficiency, checking off items on her clipboard. Nancy, good, you are here. Can you help carry the coolers down to the harbor? Antonio has prepared enough food for an army, as usual. He cannot help himself. He thinks everyone will starve if he does not feed them constantly.
Nancy nodded and began loading coolers and bags onto a wheeled cart. Her hands trembled slightly, but she did not think anyone noticed. The archaeologists were too excited, too focused on their upcoming adventure, chattering about what they might see underwater, what photos they would take, what discoveries awaited. Captain Giuseppe arrived at the hotel in his truck to help transport the supplies. He was a barrel-chested man with sun-weathered skin, calloused hands, and a wide smile that showed several gold teeth. "Beautiful day for a boat trip," he announced cheerfully. "The sea is calm as glass. The sun is perfect. Not too hot yet. You will love it. Perfect day for diving and swimming.
Nancy helped load his truck while the archaeologists walked down to the harbor in a cheerful group, chattering like excited children heading to the beach. Sophia went with them, making sure everyone knew where to go, checking that they had sunscreen and hats and water bottles. Nancy and Luca followed with the last of the supplies, pushing the heavy cart down the sloping streets toward the harbor. The harbor was busy with typical Sunday activity. Fishing boats were coming in with their morning catches, gulls wheeling and crying overhead. Tourists were renting kayaks and paddleboards from a stand on the dock. Children were feeding bread to the fish, shrieking with delight when the fish jumped. Old men sat on benches, mending nets and watching the world go by. The air smelled of salt and fish and sunscreen. The Maria Stella sat at the end of the main pier, a solid-looking vessel painted blue and white, rocking gently in the calm water. Nancy helped carry supplies onto the boat, forcing herself to breathe normally, to act natural, to ignore the anxiety clawing at her chest. But being on the boat made her anxiety spike sharply. The gentle rocking motion that most people found soothing made her stomach turn. The smell of diesel fuel mixed with salt water triggered memories she had tried to bury. The sound of water slapping against the hull sounded like drowning to her traumatized brain. Every sensation triggered memories she did not want, pulling her back to that terrible day. "Are you all right?" Luca asked quietly, noticing her pale face and the way she gripped the railing too tightly. "You look sick. Do you get seasick? We can get you something for that." "Fine," Nancy said, not convincingly. "Just tired. I did not sleep well last night."
Luca looked concerned, but did not push further. They finished loading the supplies and stepped back onto the dock. The archaeologists were boarding now, still excited and happy, taking photos of each other, claiming spots on the deck, spreading out towels. Dr. Vasquez was discussing dive plans with Captain Giuseppe, pointing to a chart and gesturing. Dr. Morrison was taking photos of the harbor, trying to capture the morning light on the old buildings. Dr. Tanaka was pointing out architectural details in the ancient warehouses that lined the waterfront, explaining their construction to anyone who would listen. Sophia stood on the dock with Nancy and Luca, waving as Captain Giuseppe started the engine with a cough of blue smoke. "Have a wonderful time," Sophia called out cheerfully. "Be safe. Take lots of photos. We will see you this evening. Have fun." The boat pulled away from the dock slowly, the engine settling into a steady rumble. The archaeologists waved from the deck, already opening beers and wine even though it was barely mid-morning. Nancy watched them go, that uneasy feeling still churning in her stomach like a living thing. The boat headed out of the harbor, leaving a white wake behind it, heading toward the open sea. Within 10 minutes, it was just a small speck on the horizon. Then it disappeared completely from view. "Well, that went smoothly," Sophia said with satisfaction, checking items off her clipboard. "They will have a lovely day. Perfect weather, perfect conditions. Come, let us get back to the hotel. We have work to do, rooms to clean while they are out." Nancy followed Sophia and Luca back up the hill, but she kept glancing over her shoulder at the sea. The boat had disappeared from view now. The water looked calm and peaceful, almost glassy smooth. The sky was clear blue, with just a few puffy white clouds on the horizon. There was no reason to worry. No reason at all. But Nancy worried anyway. She could not help it. Back at the hotel, the day passed slowly. Without the archaeologists, the hotel felt empty and quiet. Almost too quiet. Nancy did her usual tasks, but her mind was elsewhere. She kept checking the time. The boat trip was supposed to last until 5 in the evening. They would have lunch on the boat. Some would dive in the afternoon to see the underwater ruins. Then they would return before dinner, sunburned and happy and full of stories. At 3 o'clock, Nancy stood on the hotel terrace, ostensibly organizing outdoor furniture, but really just looking out at the sea. The weather was still perfect. No clouds, no wind. Just endless blue water sparkling in the afternoon sun like a field of diamonds. She told herself again that everything was fine. Stop worrying. Stop seeing danger everywhere. Your trauma is making you paranoid. But at 3:30, she noticed something that made her frown and her heart skip a beat. On the horizon, far out to sea, dark clouds were forming. They had appeared seemingly from nowhere, growing and spreading like ink in water. Nancy watched them uneasily, shading her eyes against the sun. The clouds were moving fast, rolling across the water like a gray wall advancing on the town. Too fast, much too fast. By 4 o'clock, the sky had changed completely. The bright blue had turned to an ominous gray, heavy and threatening. The wind had picked up significantly, making the lemon trees in the garden rustle and sway, their branches bending. The temperature had dropped noticeably, at least 10 degrees. Other hotel staff had come out to look at the sky, alarmed by the sudden change. Where did this come from? Pietro wondered aloud, his voice worried. The forecast said clear weather all day. I checked it this morning. Not a mention of storms. Mediterranean storms can appear fast, Maria said, her face creased with concern. Very fast, especially in the spring. The weather here is unpredictable. You can have sun and storm in the same hour. Nancy felt ice in her veins, cold and sharp. The archaeologists were out there somewhere on the water, in a boat. If a storm hit before they could get back to shore. She ran to find Sophia, taking the stairs 2 at a time. Sophia was in her office, working on accounts, oblivious to the weather change. Sophia, the weather has turned bad, Nancy said breathlessly. Very bad. The archaeologists are still out on the boat. Sophia looked up from her computer, concern crossing her face immediately. How bad? Come see, Nancy said urgently. They went to the window together. The sky was now dark gray, almost black in places, looking more like evening than afternoon. The wind was strong enough to make the shutters rattle against the walls. In the distance, over the sea, they could see sheets of rain falling like gray curtains, obscuring everything. Thunder rumbled, low and ominous. Dio mio, Sophia breathed, pressing her hand to her mouth. This is bad. This is very bad. Captain Giuseppe should have seen this coming. He should have brought them back to shore already. He knows these waters. He should have known. Maybe he did, Nancy said, though she did not believe it. That uneasy feeling had been right. Her intuition had been screaming danger, and she had been right. Maybe they are already heading back. Maybe they will beat the storm. But she did not believe it. She could feel in her bones that something was terribly wrong. By 4:30, the storm had reached Porto Marina in full force. Rain began falling, light at first like gentle fingers tapping, then heavier, then a downpour that drummed on the roof and turned the streets into rivers. Thunder rumbled constantly now, closer and louder. Lightning flickered over the sea, illuminating the dark clouds from within. People on the street ran for cover, abandoning their shopping and afternoon walks. Shop owners brought in their outdoor displays and closed shutters. The boats in the harbor bobbed violently as waves began to build, straining at their mooring lines. Nancy stood on the hotel terrace, now protected under an awning that snapped and fluttered in the wind, scanning the sea desperately. The visibility was poor through the rain and spray, but she strained her eyes, looking for any sign of a boat, any sign that they were coming back, any sign that they were okay. And then she saw it. A boat, far out, appearing and disappearing behind the large waves. It was too far away to identify for certain, but Nancy knew in her gut that it was the Maria Stella. And something was wrong, very wrong. The boat was listing badly to one side, tilted at an angle that was not natural. Even from this distance, Even through the rain, Nancy could see that it was in serious trouble. As she watched, horror building in her chest, a large wave hit the boat broadside with tremendous force. The boat tilted even more, rising up on the wave, then crashing down. Water washed over the deck. Nancy could see tiny figures on the boat clinging to railings, to masts, to anything solid. "Sophia!" Nancy shouted, her voice nearly lost in the wind and rain. "The boat! I can see the boat!" Sophia and several staff members rushed to the terrace, pressing against the railing. They strained to see through the rain and spray, following Nancy's pointing finger. "There!" Nancy pointed urgently. "You can see it when the waves rise." "It is in trouble. Serious trouble. It is going to capsize." "Are you sure it is their boat?" Luca asked, squinting into the storm. "Can you really tell from this distance?" "I am sure," Nancy said, though she could not have explained how she knew with such certainty. She just knew. She could feel it, the same way she had known something bad was going to happen. "That is the Maria Stella." "I know it is." "We need to call the Coast Guard," Sophia said, already pulling out her phone with shaking hands. But even as Sophia made the call, speaking rapidly in Italian, explaining the emergency, Nancy watched with growing horror as another large wave slammed into the boat. This time, the Maria Stella did not recover. It rolled slowly at first, as if in slow motion, then faster, inevitably. One moment it was a boat, upright and floating. The next moment it was a capsized hull, floating upside down in the churning water like the belly of a dead whale. "They are in the water!" Nancy shouted, her voice raw. "The boat capsized!" They are all in the water. Time seemed to slow down for Nancy. She could see everything with terrible, crystal clarity. Small figures in the water, barely visible as dark dots against the gray sea. Some clinging to the overturned hull. Some floating separately, already drifting. The storm waves washing over them, pushing them under, pulling them apart. The distance between them and shore looked impossibly far. At least 2 kilometers, maybe more. The rough water, the cold rain, the limited visibility, the cold water that would sap their strength and body heat quickly. Sophia was shouting into her phone, trying to explain the emergency to the Coast Guard operator. But Nancy could hear the questions, the need for exact coordinates, the protocols that had to be followed. Other staff members were panicking, some crying, some standing frozen in shock, unable to process what they were seeing. Pietro was trying to organize something, calling other boats in the harbor, but the chaos was overwhelming. No one seemed to know what to do. Everyone was talking, but nothing was happening. Nancy felt everything inside her go quiet and still, like the eye of a hurricane. She saw the people in the water. She calculated rapidly with the automatic precision of her old training. Water temperature, distance, time, strength. In these conditions, even strong swimmers would struggle. And the archaeologists were academics, not athletes. They were scholars who spent their days excavating and documenting, not training for survival. Some of them were in their 60s, like Dr. Morrison. They had maybe 20 or 30 minutes before hypothermia started to set in, maybe less in this cold spring water. Maybe 15 minutes before exhaustion and cold made them let go of the hull. Maybe 10 minutes before they started to drown. The Coast Guard would take too long. Even if they were dispatched immediately, even if they dropped everything and came at full speed, they would need 15 or 20 minutes to reach the site. By then, people might have already drowned, already lost their grip on the hull and slipped under the waves, already been pulled away by currents, already given up hope and stopped fighting. Nancy's trauma screamed at her to stay away. Stay on land. Stay safe. Do not go near the water. Do not put yourself in danger again. Remember what happened last time. Remember the burning lungs. Remember the darkness. Remember the terrible moment when you thought you were going to die. Do not do this. Stay here. Stay safe. But those people in the water, those people she had served breakfast to and chatted with and laughed with, they were going to die. 10 people. People with families and friends and students and colleagues. People who had dedicated their lives to understanding the human past. People who had dreams and plans and lives ahead of them. Dr. Vasquez with her kind smile and infectious enthusiasm. Dr. Morrison with his poetic way of talking about ancient stones. Dr. Tanaka with her wisdom about meaning and purpose. Dr. Chen, who had recognized the trauma in Nancy's eyes and offered understanding. They were all going to die if someone did not help them right now. Not in 15 minutes. Not when the Coast Guard arrived. Now. Nancy realized that her feet were already moving. She was running down the terrace steps, through the rain-soaked garden where flowers were being beaten down by the storm, toward the path that led to the beach below the hotel. Behind her, she heard Luca calling her name, his voice panicked and confused, but she did not stop. She could not stop. Every second mattered now. Every second meant the difference between life and death. The private beach was small and usually empty except for a few hotel guests. There were a few kayaks stored under a shelter, a small motorboat that the hotel kept for guest use tied to a small wooden dock. Nancy ran to the motorboat, her work shoes slipping on the wet stones, her hands already reaching for the mooring lines. She had not been on a boat in 2 years. She had not been in the water in 2 years, but she knew boats. She knew water. She had been one of the best rescue divers in the country. Her hands remembered what to do even if her mind was screaming in protest. Check the fuel gauge. Full tank, thank God. Check the motor for obvious damage. Looks good. Untie the mooring lines, fingers fumbling with wet knots, but getting them loose. The rain was soaking her, plastering her hair to her head, but she barely noticed. Thunder crashed overhead, making her flinch. Lightning flickered, illuminating the beach in stark white light for a moment. Luca arrived, breathless and soaked, having run down the path after her. Nancy, what are you doing? You cannot go out there. Look at the storm, the waves. You will die. They will die if no one helps them, Nancy said. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, calm, steady, like she was back in her old job during an emergency when calm efficiency was the only thing that mattered. The Coast Guard will be too slow. By the time they get there, people will be dead. I can reach them in maybe 10 minutes if I go now. But you said you could not be near water anymore. You said diving traumatized you. You said you cannot do this. I know what I said, Nancy replied, already climbing into the boat. She looked at Luca, and for the first time in 2 years, she felt no fear when she looked at the water. Just clarity, just purpose, just an absolute certainty about what she needed to do. But I cannot let them die. I cannot stand here safe on shore and watch people drown. I cannot do that. I will not do that. Then I am coming with you, Luca said firmly, his jaw set with determination. You cannot do this alone. Luca, you said you cannot swim well. If something happens... I can help, Luca insisted, climbing into the boat before Nancy could stop him. I can pull people into the boat. I can bail water. I can radio for help. You need someone. You cannot do this completely alone. Nancy hesitated for only a second, calculating. He was right. She did need help. Pulling unconscious or exhausted people from rough water into a small boat was difficult work. Having another pair of hands would double their chances of success. Get in. Quick. We do not have time. They climbed into the boat together. Nancy pulled the motor's starting cord with all her strength. Once, nothing. Twice, still nothing. Her heart pounded. Please start. Please. On the third pull, The motor roared to life, sputtering at first, then smoothing out. Nancy did not waste time. She gunned the throttle, and the small boat shot away from the beach, into the storm, into the waves, into danger.
The waves were rough even close to shore, much rougher than they looked from the terrace. The boat pitched and rolled violently. Cold spray washed over them, soaking them completely within seconds. The wind tore at their clothes and hair. Nancy gripped the tiller with both hands, steering the boat toward where she had last seen the capsized vessel. The distance that had looked so far from the hotel terrace now looked impossibly far from the water level, measured in boat length after boat length. The waves blocked her view constantly. She could not see the overturned boat. She could not see the people in the water. She was navigating on memory and instinct. There! Luca shouted suddenly, pointing with a shaking hand. Nancy saw it. The white hull of the Maria Stella, appearing and disappearing behind the waves like a ghost. She aimed for it, pushing the small motor as hard as she could without swamping the boat. The little vessel climbed up wave faces, hung suspended at the top for a heart-stopping moment, then crashed down the other side with bone-jarring impacts. Water sloshed in the bottom of the boat, cold and growing deeper. Luca grabbed a bucket that was rolling around and began bailing frantically, his movements panicked but effective. They were halfway there when Nancy saw the first person in the water, not clinging to the hull but floating some distance away. A head bobbing in the waves, arms waving weakly without much strength left. The person was already exhausted, already losing the fight. Nancy turned the boat sharply toward them, her hands sure on the tiller despite the fear trying to creep in. As they got closer, she recognized Dr. Morrison. His white hair was plastered to his head, barely visible against the gray water. His face was pale with cold, his lips already taking on a bluish tint. But he was conscious, treading water with movements that were becoming more and more sluggish, trying to stay afloat with weakening limbs. "Here!" Nancy shouted over the wind and waves. "Grab the side of the boat!" She brought the boat alongside Dr. Morrison as carefully as she could in the rough conditions. He grabbed the gunwale with one hand, but he did not have the strength to pull himself up. His arms were shaking with exhaustion and cold. Luca leaned over the side, reaching down with both hands. He grabbed Dr. Morrison's arm. Together, Nancy holding the tiller steady with one hand and reaching down with the other, they hauled the older man into the boat. It was not graceful. They practically dragged him over the side. He collapsed in the bottom of the boat, coughing and gasping, water streaming from his clothes. "The others," he managed to say between coughs that racked his body, "still at the boat." Some went under. Some went under when it flipped. Trapped below. Nancy's heart sank like a stone. Some went under. But she could not think about that now. She had to focus on the ones she could still save. She had to keep moving, keep working, one person at a time. She drove the boat toward the capsized Maria Stella as fast as she dared. As they got closer, she could see people clinging to the hull with desperate hands. She counted rapidly, her training taking over. 5 people. But Dr. Morrison had said there were 10 in total. If 5 were here and 1 was Dr. Morrison, that meant 4 were missing, 4 people unaccounted for. Nancy pulled up alongside the hull. The archaeologist in the water looked at her with desperate hope mixed with disbelief. She recognized Dr. Vasquez, Dr. Tanaka, Dr. Chen, and 2 others whose names she could not remember in the moment. "One at a time!" Nancy shouted over the wind and waves and thunder. "Luca, help them in, carefully. Do not swamp the boat." Luca reached down and grabbed the nearest person's hand. It was Dr. Tanaka, the smallest of the group, which made her easier to pull up. He pulled her, and Nancy grabbed her other arm. Together, they hauled her into the boat. She was shaking violently from the cold, her teeth chattering so hard Nancy could hear them clicking together even over the storm. But she was alive. She was safe. "The others!" Dr. Tanaka gasped through chattering teeth, her eyes wide with shock and fear. 4 went under when the boat flipped. They were below deck when it happened. They might still be trapped inside. Air pockets. They might be alive in air pockets. Nancy's blood ran cold. The words hit her like a physical blow. Trapped inside the capsized boat, upside down, underwater, in the dark. With limited air, they would run out of air in minutes if they had not already drowned, if they had not already been knocked unconscious when the boat rolled, if they had not already panicked and done something that killed them. She looked at the overturned hull bobbing in the waves. She would have to go under. She would have to dive into the dark water, into the hull of the upside-down boat to look for survivors. into the exact situation that terrified her most, into her worst nightmare made real. Every instinct screamed at her not to do it. The panic was there, lurking at the edges of her mind like a predator waiting to pounce. The memory of being 85 meters down with no air, the memory of burning lungs and darkness closing in, the memory of that terrible moment when she had thought she was going to die, the memory of the peace that had tried to settle over her as her brain began to shut down, the trauma that had defined her life for 2 years. But four people were trapped, four people who might still be alive, four people whose only hope was her. She could not abandon them. She could not let them die when she might be able to save them. Nancy made her decision in a heartbeat, the same way she had made decisions during her career as a rescue diver. Quick, sure, no second guessing. Luca, keep pulling people into our boat, Nancy said, already pulling off her shoes with shaking fingers. I am going under. Nancy, no! Luca protested, grabbing her arm. You said you could not dive anymore. You said your body will not let you. This is too dangerous. I do not have a choice, Nancy said, pulling her arm free. She was already pulling off her jacket, stripping down to the tank top she wore underneath. Those people are drowning right now. Every second I wait is a second closer to death for them. I have to try. She did not give herself time to think, time to let fear overwhelm her, time to change her mind. If she thought about it, if she let herself feel the terror, she would freeze. She would be paralyzed. She had to act on instinct and training. Nancy dove into the water. The cold hit her like she had been punched, driving the air from her lungs. The Mediterranean was not warm in the spring, and the storm had made it colder. But Nancy had trained in water much colder than this in Norway, in Iceland, in winter conditions. She could handle it, she could function, she could do this. She surfaced, gasping from the cold shock, and took 3 huge breaths, hyperventilating slightly to load her blood with oxygen. Then she dove under the capsized hull, pulling herself down into the darkness with strong strokes. The world went dark and confusing immediately. The boat was upside down, everything reversed. What had been the deck was now the ceiling above her. What had been the cabin floor was now below her. Nancy's eyes adjusted slowly to the murky water, illuminated only by dim light filtering through gaps and portholes. She could see vague shapes but no details. She swam deeper, looking for air pockets. In a capsized boat, air could be trapped in various spaces as the boat went over. People could breathe in those pockets. For a short time, until the air became too carbon dioxide rich, until they panicked, until they made a mistake. There. Nancy saw a pocket of air, trapped against what had been the floor, now the ceiling. She surfaced into it, breaking through into a space about a meter wide. Her head emerged into air that smelled stale and was humid with breath. And there was someone there, a figure barely visible in the gloom, coughing, alive. Hello, Nancy called, her voice echoing strangely in the confined space. Can you hear me? A cough, then a weak voice, male, terrified. Here. I am here. Please. Please help me. Nancy swam toward the voice with powerful strokes. It was a young man, one of the younger archaeologists. She could not see his face clearly in the darkness. Are you hurt? She asked, her voice steady and calm despite her racing heart. My leg. Caught? Trapped when the boat flipped. Nancy dove under the water again, feeling along the man's body with her hands to where his leg was pinned under a heavy bench that had come loose when the boat capsized. The water was murky, visibility almost zero. She was working by touch alone. She tried to lift the bench, pulling with all her strength, but she could not get enough leverage in the water. The bench was solid wood, waterlogged and heavy. She surfaced again, gasping. I cannot lift it alone, she told the young man honestly. I need help. Can you stay here? Keep your head above water. Do not panic. Panic uses oxygen faster. How long? The young man's voice was terrified, on the edge of breaking into full panic. How long until you come back? I am scared. It is so dark, so cold. 10 minutes, maybe less. I will be as fast as I can. I promise you I will come back. I will not leave you to die. Do you understand? I will come back. Okay. His voice was small. Okay, I will wait. Please hurry. Nancy took a deep breath, the stale air burning her lungs, and dove back down. She swam toward where she remembered the opening was, feeling her way through the dark water. Her lungs were already starting to burn, not from lack of air this time, but from the exertion in the cold water and the fact that she was out of diving shape. She needed to be careful. She could not help anyone if she pushed herself too hard and passed out or got lost in the capsized boat. She found the opening and emerged from under the hull, breaking through into the storm. The waves crashed over her head. For a moment, she could not orient herself. Where was her boat? Where was Luca? She spun in the water, disoriented and starting to panic. Then she heard Luca calling her name, his voice frantic. She turned toward the sound and saw their small boat, now holding 6 people crammed into a space meant for maybe 4 comfortably. Luca was waving frantically, his face a mask of terror and relief. Nancy swam toward them, fighting the waves that tried to push her away. When she reached the boat, she grabbed the side, breathing hard, her chest heaving. There are people trapped inside. She gasped out between breaths. At least one, maybe more. His leg is pinned. I need someone strong to help me lift the bench. I cannot do it alone. I will go, said Dr. Vasquez immediately. She was one of the people Luca had pulled into the boat while Nancy was under. Despite the cold, despite having just been saved herself, despite the danger she had just survived, her voice was firm, strong. I am a trained diver. I have done this kind of work before. I can help. It is dangerous, Nancy warned, looking at the older woman's face. Very dangerous, dark, confusing, easy to get disoriented, easy to get trapped yourself. You could die down there. I understand, Dr. Vasquez said, already stripping off her outer layers to make swimming easier. But I am not leaving my colleague to drown. These people are my team, my responsibility. We go down together or not at all. Nancy nodded, recognizing the determination she saw in Dr. Vasquez's eyes. It was the same determination she had felt when she decided to go into the water. Luca, give us 2 minutes. Time us. If we are not back in 2 minutes, you need to get everyone to shore. Do not wait for us. These people need medical attention. Get them to safety. Do you understand? Nancy, Luca began, his face anguished. 2 minutes, Nancy said firmly, leaving no room for argument. Then she turned to Dr. Vasquez. Follow me exactly. Stay close. Do not get separated. If you feel panic starting, if you feel disoriented, surface immediately. Better to abort than to drown. We can try again, but we cannot help anyone if we are dead. Dr. Vasquez nodded, her jaw set with determination. Together, they dove under the hull. Nancy led the way, swimming through the dark, confusing space, retracing the path she had taken before. The water felt colder now, or maybe she was just getting colder, her core temperature dropping. Behind her, she could sense Dr. Vasquez following close, her movements strong and confident. They surfaced in the air pocket together. The young man was still there, still breathing, but his lips looked blue even in the dim light. We are back, Nancy told him, trying to sound confident and reassuring. We will get you out. Just hang on a little longer. She and Dr. Vasquez dove together, feeling for the bench that had trapped his leg. Their hands found it in the murky water. Nancy positioned herself on one side, Dr. Vasquez on the other. They grabbed the bench, braced their feet against solid surfaces, and lifted together with all their combined strength. At first, nothing happened. The bench was heavy, waterlogged, awkward, and the water made everything difficult. Nancy's muscles screamed with effort. Her lungs burned, demanding air. But she did not let go. She could not let go. A man's life depended on them lifting this bench. Then, slowly, the bench shifted, lifted an inch, 2 inches. The young man pulled his leg free with a cry that was half pain, half relief. Nancy and Dr. Vasquez let the bench drop with a dull thud that reverberated through the water and surfaced, gasping for air. Can you swim? Nancy asked the young man urgently, her voice rough. Is your leg broken? Can you move it? I think so. My leg hurts, but I can move it. I can feel my toes. It is not broken. Then we go now. Fast, no delays. before the air pocket collapses, before we run out of strength. Stay between us. If you get tired, grab onto one of us. Do not stop swimming. Do not give up. Understand? The young man nodded, his face pale but determined. Nancy led the way out, swimming hard, using the last of her strength reserves. Behind her came the young man, and behind him, Dr. Vasquez, making sure he did not fall behind or panic. They emerged into the storm, into the gray light, into the waves and rain. Luca was there with the boat, fighting to keep it steady in the rough water. Hands reached down. Dr. Chen and Dr. Morrison, both recovered enough to help, pulled the young man into the boat. Nancy and Dr. Vasquez scrambled in after him, collapsing in the bottom among the tangle of people and water and discarded clothes. "3 more," Dr. Morrison said urgently, his voice hoarse. There were 3 more below deck when the boat flipped. A man and 2 women. Nancy's heart sank, but she did not let herself feel despair. Not yet. 3 more people. And she was exhausted. Her muscles were trembling. Her teeth were chattering from the cold, but 3 more people were trapped in that dark underwater maze. She could not abandon them. She looked at Dr. Vasquez. The older woman looked back at her. Despite the cold, despite the terror of what they had just done, Nancy saw determination in her eyes, the same determination Nancy felt. "Again?" Dr. Vasquez asked simply. "Again," Nancy confirmed. They dove. The second rescue was harder, much harder. Nancy's arms felt like lead, her legs cramped with each kick. The cold was seeping deep into her bones, making her movements sluggish. But she pushed forward into the darkness, searching for more air pockets, more survivors. They found 2 people together in a pocket near what had been the boat's cabin, now inverted. A man and a woman, both middle-aged, both terrified but alive and conscious. Neither was physically trapped, but both were so cold and scared and disoriented that they needed help swimming out. They were in shock, unable to function properly, shaking so hard they could barely move. Nancy took the woman by the arm. "Stay with me," she said firmly. "Do exactly what I do. If you panic and try to surface in the wrong place, you will drown. Follow me. Trust me." The woman nodded, her eyes wide with fear but also with trust. Dr. Vasquez took the man. "Together," she said. Together, they guided the 2 survivors through the dark water, under the hull, out into the storm. It was slow. The survivors were weak and frightened, but they made it. Luca pulled them into the boat. 8 people saved. 2 still missing. But where was the last person? Nancy did not let herself rest. She did not let herself think about how exhausted she was, how cold, how her whole body was shaking. She just dove again. This time she went alone. Dr. Vasquez was too exhausted, shaking so hard she could barely hold on to the boat. Nancy did not blame her. She did not know how she was still moving herself. Adrenaline, probably, and something else. The same thing that had made her a great rescue diver before the accident. An inability to give up as long as there was still a chance. An inability to leave someone to die when she might be able to save them. The third air pocket was smaller, harder to find. Nancy swam through the capsized boat, her movements becoming sluggish, her lungs screaming for air. She almost missed it, but she heard something. A splash, a cough. She turned toward the sound. 2 people, crammed into a tiny pocket of air, barely enough space for both of them to keep their heads above water. They looked at her with desperate hope as she surfaced among them. "Nancy!" one of them gasped. "Captain Giuseppe? Is that Nancy?" She recognized him even in the gloom. And beside him, the youngest of the archaeologists, a woman in her early 30s with a name Nancy could not remember. There was blood on her forehead, dark against her pale skin. "I am getting you out," Nancy said, though her voice sounded distant and strange even to her own ears. "Both of you. Can you both swim?" "Yes," Captain Giuseppe said. "But she hit her head when the boat flipped." "She is dizzy, confused. I do not think she can navigate out alone." Nancy looked at the young woman more closely. There was blood on her forehead from a cut, though it was hard to see clearly in the dark how bad it was. She might have a concussion. Swimming through the confusing underwater space might be impossible for her. She might panic. She might become disoriented and swim the wrong way. "You first," Nancy told Captain Giuseppe firmly, leaving no room for argument. Get yourself out. Then come back with Luca or whoever is strong enough. Help me with her. 2 people to guide her out safely. No, he protested, his voice anguished. I cannot leave my passenger. As captain, it is my responsibility. As captain, you need to get out first so you can help save her. Nancy interrupted, her voice hard. You cannot help her if you drown down here with her. Go, now, fast. We do not have time to argue. Captain Giuseppe hesitated for only a second, then nodded. He understood. He took a deep breath and dove, disappearing into the murky water. Nancy was alone with the injured woman in the tiny air pocket. The young archaeologist looked at her with frightened eyes. I am scared, she whispered. I am so scared. I do not want to die down here, not like this, not in the dark. I know, Nancy said, gentler now. She reached out and took the woman's cold hand, squeezing it. I am scared too. But we are going to get out of this, both of us, together. I promise you, I will not leave you. Do you understand? I will not leave you to die. It was a promise she could not be sure of keeping. The air pocket was getting smaller, she noticed, with a sinking feeling. Water was slowly filling the space as the boat settled lower. They had maybe 5 minutes before the pocket disappeared completely, maybe less. Maybe they were already out of time. Nancy heard splashing. Captain Giuseppe was back, and Luca was with him. Both men surfaced in the air pocket, which was now so crowded there was barely room for everyone to keep their heads above water. We are all going together, Luca said, his face set with determination. Slowly and carefully. I will guide her. Captain Giuseppe, you go first and clear the path. Make sure we do not get turned around. Nancy, you stay with me and her in case something goes wrong. It was a good plan. A smart plan. They positioned themselves around the injured woman like protective guards. On the count of 3, they all took deep breaths and dove together into the murky water. The swim out felt endless, like swimming through a nightmare that would never end. Nancy kept her hand on the young woman's arm, making sure she did not drift away or panic or do something that would get them all killed. Luca was on her other side, guiding her with firm hands. Ahead of them, Captain Giuseppe's legs kicked through the water, leading the way, making sure they were going in the right direction. Nancy's lungs were screaming. She needed to breathe. She needed air, now. But they were still under the hull, still in the darkness, still swimming through the capsized boat. She forced herself to keep swimming, to not panic, to stay focused. Just a little farther, just a little more. Do not give up now, not when you are so close. Then she saw light ahead. Real light. Gray and filtered through rain, but light. The opening, freedom. Air, they were almost there. Just a little more. Keep swimming, do not stop. They emerged into the storm, all 4 of them at once, gasping and coughing and choking. The small boat was right there, impossibly full of people now, but somehow they made room. Hands reached down from every direction. People pulled them up. The young woman first, then Luca, then Captain Giuseppe, then finally Nancy. Nancy collapsed in the bottom of the boat among the tangle of wet bodies and discarded clothing and buckets of water. She had done it. She had saved them all. 10 archaeologists. Captain Giuseppe. All alive. All breathing. All safe. But then the panic attack hit her, delayed by adrenaline and purpose, but now crashing over her like one of the storm waves. She could not breathe. Her chest was too tight, like iron bands around her ribs. The world was spinning, tilting. She was back in the deep water, 85 meters down with no air, drowning, dying, darkness closing in. But then hands were on her shoulders, warm and firm. Someone was talking to her, calm and steady. Dr. Chen, the archaeologist. Nancy, listen to me. You are safe. You are in the boat. You are not drowning. You are not underwater. You are in the boat, in the air, surrounded by people. Breathe with me. In through your nose, count of 4. Hold for 4. Out through your mouth, count of 4. That is it. You are doing great. Stay with me.
Nancy focused on Dr. Chen's voice, on her steady presence, on the rhythm of breathing she was establishing. Slowly, painfully slowly, the panic receded. The iron bands around her chest loosened. Her breathing slowed from gasping to something more normal. The world stopped spinning quite so violently. That is it, Dr. Chen said softly, her voice soothing. You are okay. You are safe. You just saved 11 lives. Do you understand that? 11 people are alive because of you. You are a hero. But right now, you need to rest. Let Luca drive the boat. You rest. Nancy looked around the boat. 11 people, all shivering, all exhausted, but all alive. Luca was at the motor, pointing the boat toward shore, his face set with concentration. The storm was starting to ease, the worst of it passing to the east. Through the rain, Nancy could see the harbor ahead, and other boats coming out from shore. the Coast Guard arriving too late to help with the rescue, but in time to assist with the return journey. They had done it. Against all odds, with a tiny motorboat in a storm, with no proper equipment or support, they had saved everyone. Not a single person had died. Not one. Nancy started to laugh, though it sounded more like sobbing. Then she started to cry, tears mixing with the rain and salt water on her face. Then she was doing both at once, laughing and crying, relief and terror and joy and exhaustion all mixed together into something overwhelming. Dr. Vasquez put an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. Dr. Tanaka held her hand, squeezing gently. They did not say anything. Words were inadequate. They just held her while she cried and laughed and shook, letting out all the fear and trauma and determination that had driven her for the past hour. The small boat reached the harbor, escorted by the Coast Guard vessels that surrounded them like protective escorts. A crowd had gathered on the dock. Hundreds of people. Sophia was there, her face pale with worry that transformed into relief when she saw them. Pietro was there. Maria, Antonio. Half the town, it seemed, drawn by news of the capsized boat and the miracle rescue. As the boat docked, people rushed forward to help. Paramedics were waiting, ready with blankets and equipment. Ambulances sat with lights flashing. Police were trying to manage the crowd. Everyone was talking at once, asking questions, wanting to know what happened, how everyone survived, who saved them. Nancy tried to refuse treatment, insisting she was fine. She was just cold and tired. Others needed help more. But a paramedic, a young woman with kind eyes, firmly sat her down and wrapped her in thermal blankets. "You are hypothermic," the paramedic said gently but firmly. "Not severely, but your core temperature is too low. You need to warm up slowly and carefully. We are taking you to the hospital for observation. No arguments." "But the others," Nancy protested weakly. "The others are being taken care of," the paramedic said. 11 other ambulances. Everyone gets medical attention. Now it is your turn to let someone take care of you. You have been taking care of everyone else. Time for you to rest." In the ambulance, wrapped in warm blankets with a heating pad against her chest, Nancy finally allowed herself to process what had just happened. She had dove. She had been in the water. She had gone into the dark, confusing, terrifying space of the capsized boat, not once, not twice, but 3 times. 4 times if you counted the initial dive to find Dr. Morrison. She had done everything that she had been unable to do for 2 years. Everything her therapist had told her to avoid. Everything that triggered her trauma. And she had saved lives. Not just 1 or 2. All of them. 11 people who would have died without her intervention. The meaning she had been searching for. The purpose of her survival. Maybe this was it. Maybe she had survived her accident so she could be here, today, when these people needed her. Maybe everything had led to this moment. The accident, the trauma, the years of healing, moving to Porto Marina, working at the hotel, meeting the archaeologists. All of it building to this day, this hour, this rescue. Nancy felt tears on her face again, but she was too exhausted to wipe them away. She just let them fall, let herself feel everything, let herself acknowledge what she had done. She had faced her worst fear. She had gone into the water despite her terror. And she had won. Fear had not defeated her. Trauma had not defeated her. She was stronger than both. As the ambulance pulled away from the harbor, sirens wailing, Nancy closed her eyes. She was alive. They were all alive. And for the first time in 2 years, the shadow of her accident did not hang over her. She had faced it. She had conquered it. She had proven that she was more than her trauma. She was Nancy Rodriguez. and she was a survivor, a rescuer, a hero. But most importantly, she was herself again. Part 5. Recovery and Renewal. Nancy spent 6 hours in the hospital. She was treated for mild hypothermia, exhaustion, and minor cuts and bruises she had not even noticed getting. The doctors checked her vital signs repeatedly, monitored her core temperature as it slowly rose back to normal, listened to her lungs for signs of water inhalation. They also had a psychiatric nurse observe her for signs of psychological trauma, given what she had been through and her history of PTSD from diving accidents. But remarkably, Nancy felt okay. More than okay, actually. She felt strong, clear. The fog that had hung over her for 2 years, the constant low-level anxiety, the shadow of her accident, all of it had lifted. For the first time since her accident, she felt like herself again. Completely herself. Not the broken version, not the fearful version, just Nancy. Sophia came to visit her in the hospital, bringing dry clothes that actually fit and genuine gratitude that shone in her eyes. "What you did today," Sophia said, her voice thick with emotion, tears streaming down her face. "I have no words. You saved them all, Nancy. All of them. 10 archaeologists and Captain Giuseppe. 11 people who would be dead if not for you. I do not know how to thank you enough." "Luca helped," Nancy said, uncomfortable with all the praise. "Dr. Vasquez helped too. She went down into that capsized boat with me. Without her, I could not have gotten everyone out. It was a team effort. I could not have done it alone." "But you led the team," Sophia said firmly, taking Nancy's hands in hers. "You were the one who knew what to do. You were the one who ran into danger when everyone else was frozen with fear or calling for help. You were the one who dove into that boat multiple times, into the dark, into your worst nightmare. You overcame your trauma to save people. That is, Nancy, that is the most heroic thing I have ever witnessed in my life." Sophia shook her head in wonder. "And I never knew. I never knew you were such a skilled diver. I knew you had been a diver before. You told me in your interview. But I did not understand. I did not realize you were that good, that brave, that capable." "I told you in my interview," Nancy reminded her with a small smile. "You asked why I left diving. I told you about my accident." "Yes, but I did not understand the scope of it," Sophia said. "I did not realize you were one of the best rescue divers in Italy, that you had saved 23 lives before your accident, that you were called the Angel of the Deep. I just knew you were a woman who had been through something difficult and wanted a quiet job by the sea. I had no idea of your capabilities." Nancy felt her face flush. "I am still just a bellboy, Sophia. Today was an emergency, an exception. I am not going back to rescue diving. I do not think I could do that work full time again. The anxiety is still there. It will always be there, probably. Today I pushed through it because I had to, because people were dying. But I do not know if I could do it day after day." "You do not have to do anything," Sophia said, squeezing her hands. "You do not have to be a rescue diver. You do not have to be a hero. You can be whatever you want to be. But thank you. Thank you for being brave today when it mattered most. Thank you for saving my guests. Thank you for being the person who ran toward danger instead of away from it." The archaeologists were in the same hospital, scattered across different rooms on different floors. All of them would make full recoveries, the doctors said. Some had mild to moderate hypothermia. Some had minor injuries from the boat capsizing, cuts and bruises mostly. The young woman who had hit her head had a mild concussion and needed observation overnight. But everyone would be fine. Everyone had survived. A miracle, the doctors kept saying. A miracle that no one had died. Dr. Morrison and Dr. Vasquez came to visit Nancy's room before she was discharged. Dr. Morrison looked older than he had that morning, more fragile, his white hair disheveled and his movements slow. But his eyes were bright with emotion and gratitude. "My dear girl," he said, his voice rough and breaking, "you saved my life today." I was in that water, so cold, so tired. My arms and legs would not work anymore. I did not think I would make it to shore. I thought I was going to die out there, cold and alone in the storm. Then you appeared like a miracle, like an angel, just like they used to call you. "I just did what needed to be done," Nancy said, uncomfortable with the praise and the attention. Anyone would have done the same. Anyone who could swim, who knew boats, who had training. "No," Dr. Vasquez said firmly, her voice leaving no room for argument. "No, Nancy. Not anyone would have done what you did. Most people would have frozen in panic. Most people would have waited for professional help, for the Coast Guard, for someone else to take responsibility. But you acted immediately, and you acted expertly. You coordinated a rescue operation in the middle of a storm with a tiny boat and minimal equipment and saved 11 people. That is extraordinary. That is heroic." Nancy shook her head, still uncomfortable. "I had training. I used to be a rescue diver. Before I had an accident that made me afraid of the water. I told you that. Today was the first time I have been in water in 2 years." Both archaeologists stared at her, their expressions shifting from gratitude to amazement. "You had not been in water for 2 years?" Dr. Morrison said slowly, as if testing each word. "And today you dove multiple times into a dark, capsized boat to save strangers, while having PTSD from a diving accident?" "Not strangers," Nancy corrected gently. "You were guests at my hotel. I knew you. I served you breakfast every morning. We talked about history and archaeology. You were kind to me. I could not let you die. I could not stand safe on shore and watch you drown." Dr. Vasquez sat down on the edge of Nancy's hospital bed, her movements careful. "Let me tell you something about courage," she said, her voice soft but intense. "True courage is not the absence of fear. True courage is acting despite fear. What you did today, facing your trauma, your deepest fears, to save us. That is the bravest thing I have ever witnessed in my entire life. And I have worked with brave people. I have worked with military divers, with cave divers, with people who do dangerous work every day. But none of them have shown the courage you showed today." Nancy felt tears sting her eyes, emotion overwhelming her exhausted defenses. "I have been trying to find meaning in my survival," she said, her voice small and vulnerable, "in why I lived through my accident. A wise person told me that survival alone is not enough. We must find purpose in surviving. For 2 years, I have been searching for that purpose. Today, I think I found it. Maybe I survived so I could save you. Maybe everything led to this moment. And you found yours today," Dr. Vasquez said gently, reaching out to squeeze Nancy's hand. "You survived your accident so you could be here today. So you could save 11 lives. So you could show all of us what real courage looks like. Your survival had meaning, it had purpose, and we are all alive to prove it." The doctors released Nancy that evening with instructions to rest, stay warm, and watch for delayed symptoms of hypothermia or shock. She returned to the hotel, where the staff greeted her like a returning hero. They had prepared a special meal in her honor, though Nancy felt too tired to eat much. Antonio had drawn her a hot bath with essential oils and salts. Maria had placed fresh flowers in her room, the good ones usually reserved for guests. Pietro had somehow procured a bottle of very expensive wine and insisted she keep it. Luca hugged her so hard she thought her ribs might crack, lifting her off her feet. "You were amazing," he said, his voice muffled against her shoulder, his whole body shaking with emotion. "I have never seen anything like it. You were so calm, so sure of what to do. I was terrified the whole time, but you were like a different person out there. Or maybe the same person you used to be. The rescue diver, the hero. You were incredible." "I was myself," Nancy said, hugging him back. "My real self. The self I had lost for a while. But you were brave too, Luca. You came with me even though you were scared. You helped pull people into the boat. You kept us from sinking. We did it together." That night, for the first time in 2 years, Nancy slept deeply and dreamlessly. No nightmares, no panic, no waking up gasping and convinced she was drowning. Just deep, peaceful, healing sleep. The next day, the story was everywhere. It was impossible to escape. Local newspapers had it on the front page with photos taken by people on the shore. Regional news programs led with it. Even national television picked up the story. Hotel Bellboy, who had once been a rescue diver, saves 10 archaeologists from a capsized boat, overcoming her own trauma with diving to rescue strangers in a storm. Journalists came to Porta Marina in droves. They wanted to interview Nancy, Captain Giuseppe, the archaeologists, anyone who had been involved. They wanted photos of the hotel, the harbor, the site where the boat had capsized. They wanted to tell the story of the miracle rescue. Nancy tried to avoid the attention, uncomfortable with being the center of so much focus. She was not good with publicity. She had never liked being in the spotlight, but it was impossible to hide. Sophia asked her to do at least one interview, to represent the hotel well, to share the story properly. Nancy agreed reluctantly, though she felt uncomfortable with all the focus on her rather than on the team effort. The interview was with a national news program, a professional journalist who asked thoughtful questions instead of just looking for sensational sound bites. Nancy answered honestly, explaining her background as a rescue diver, her accident, her trauma, the 2 years of healing, and then the rescue. "Were you afraid when you dove into the capsized boat?" the journalist asked, leaning forward with genuine curiosity. Nancy thought about this carefully, wanting to give an honest answer. "Yes," she said finally. "I was terrified. Every moment I was underwater, my body was screaming at me to surface, to get out, to run away. My trauma was there, trying to overwhelm me. But I have learned something important over the past 2 years. Fear does not have to stop us. We can be afraid and still act. We can acknowledge our terror and move forward anyway. The people in that boat needed me. That need was stronger than my fear." What would you say to other people dealing with trauma, with fear that holds them back from living fully? Nancy looked directly at the camera, thinking about everyone watching who might be struggling with their own traumas. "I would say that healing is not linear. It is not about never being afraid again. It is about learning to function despite fear. It is about finding purpose that is stronger than the trauma. For 2 years, I ran from my past. I avoided water. I tried to pretend that part of my life had never existed. But when people needed me, when I had to choose between my fear and their lives, I found that my training, my skills, my core self were still there. The trauma had not destroyed me. It had just hidden my strength for a while." After the interview aired, Nancy received hundreds of messages from around the country. People thanked her. People shared their own stories of trauma and recovery. People said she had inspired them to face their own fears. Nancy was overwhelmed by the response, reading message after message late into the night. But the message that moved her most came from Marco, her old diving partner. He sent an email. I saw you on television. Nancy, I am so proud of you. Not just for the rescue, though that was incredible, but for facing your fear, for diving again, for proving that trauma does not have to win. I always knew you were the bravest person I ever met. Now the whole country knows it too. If you ever want to talk about diving again, professionally, give me a call. Your old team misses you. We miss your skill, but more than that, we miss you. Nancy read the email 3 times, tears streaming down her face. She had not spoken to Marco since she left her diving job 2.5 years ago. She had been too ashamed, too broken. But now she felt ready to reconnect. Not necessarily to return to her old job, but to rebuild that bridge, to acknowledge that part of herself again. The archaeologists stayed in Porto Marina for an extra week to recover from their ordeal. Their research project was delayed, but they did not mind. They spent their time resting, doing light work on notes and analysis, processing what had happened, and they spent time getting to know Nancy better, understanding the woman who had saved their lives. Dr. Vasquez, in particular, became close with Nancy. They had bonded during the rescue, diving together into danger, working as a team. One evening, they sat on the hotel terrace, watching the sunset over the calm sea, the storm a distant memory. I have been thinking about your question, Dr. Vasquez said thoughtfully. About finding meaning in survival? Yes? Nancy prompted, curious. In my research, I study ancient Mediterranean cultures. Shipwrecks, underwater ruins, the remains of civilizations. Do you know what I have found? Every culture that survived long-term, that lasted for centuries, had something in common. They valued their survivors. The people who had been through terrible things, wars, famines, disasters, near-death experiences, were honored. Their stories were told and retold. Their wisdom was sought out. Because surviving hardship teaches us things that can only be learned through suffering. It gives us perspective, empathy, strength. What did your ordeal teach you? Nancy asked. Dr. Vasquez smiled, her expression thoughtful. I am still learning, still processing. But one thing I know for sure, I will never take a calm day for granted again. Every sunrise, every meal, every conversation with friends feels precious now. I almost lost all of this. That young woman with the concussion, Dr. Emma Baker, she almost died. Captain Giuseppe, Dr. Morrison, all of us, we came so close to death. We could feel it reaching for us. Now we have a second chance at life, and I intend to live it fully, not just existing, really living. Nancy nodded slowly. Second chances. That is what this feels like. I had a second chance when I survived my accident, but I did not appreciate it. I did not use it well. I just existed, just survived. But now, after this, I feel like I understand. I was given a second chance for a reason, to be here, to save you, to prove to myself that I am stronger than my fear. It is what it is, Dr. Vasquez confirmed. And you gave us our second chances. You gave us our lives back. We owe you everything. On the last day of the archaeologists' extended stay, they organized a small ceremony in the hotel. They had commissioned a plaque to be hung in the lobby, commemorating the rescue. The plaque was beautiful, made of polished bronze with elegant lettering. Sophia unveiled the plaque with tears streaming down her face. It read, "On this day in April, Nancy Rodriguez, hotel staff member and former rescue diver, saved 11 lives in a storm at sea. Her courage, skill, and selflessness embody the highest ideals of humanity. With eternal gratitude, the survivors." The archaeologists applauded. The hotel staff applauded. Even some hotel guests who had heard the story applauded. Nancy stood there, overwhelmed, looking at her name on the polished metal. It felt surreal, permanent, like something that would outlast her. "I do not need this," she said quietly to Dr. Morrison, who stood beside her. "I was just doing what had to be done. What anyone would have done." "I know you do not need it," Dr. Morrison said kindly. "But let us honor you anyway. Let us mark this moment, because what you did matters, not just to us, though certainly to us, but to everyone who hears this story and learns that courage exists, that people still risk themselves for strangers, that trauma does not have to define us forever. Your story will inspire people for years to come. That plaque will be there long after we are all gone, telling your story."
After the ceremony, the archaeologists gave Nancy their personal contact information: business cards, email addresses, phone numbers, invitations. "Stay in touch," Dr. Tanaka said warmly. "If you ever want to visit Japan, you have a place to stay. My home is your home. If you ever want to learn more about archaeology, we have libraries full of books for you. Come visit, please."
"And if you ever want to dive again," Dr. Vasquez said with a meaningful look, taking both of Nancy's hands in hers, "let me know. I lead research expeditions every summer. We always need skilled divers. Some of them are at the most interesting archaeological sites you could ever see. Underwater ruins that have not been explored yet. History waiting to be discovered. You would be perfect for this work. Think about it." Nancy smiled, surprised by how much the offer touched her. "I will think about it," she said. And she meant it. The idea did not frighten her as much as she expected. In fact, it intrigued her, excited her even. The archaeologists left the next morning. Nancy and Luca carried their luggage down to the waiting bus, just as they had on that first day when everything began. But everything was different now. Nancy was different. The world was different. The archaeologists hugged Nancy goodbye, some of them crying. Dr. Morrison held her hands and looked into her eyes with such gratitude and emotion that Nancy had to look away. "Thank you," he said simply, his voice breaking. "For my life. For my second chance. I will never forget what you did for us." After the bus pulled away, Nancy stood in the hotel driveway for a long time, watching the road until the bus disappeared from view. She felt different, lighter, like a weight she had been carrying for 2 years had finally been lifted from her shoulders. Sophia came to stand beside her, silent for a moment. "What are you thinking?" she finally asked. "I am thinking that I came to Porto Marina to hide from my past," Nancy said slowly, working out the thought as she spoke. "To escape, to forget. But instead, I found my future. Instead of losing myself, I found myself again." "And what does that future look like?" Sophia asked gently. Nancy smiled, genuine and bright. "I am not entirely sure yet.
But for the first time in years, I'm excited to find out. I'm not afraid anymore. Or rather, I am still afraid sometimes, but the fear does not control me anymore. I control it."
Over the next few weeks, Nancy continued working at the hotel. But something had shifted inside her. She loved her job. She loved the hotel and the staff and the town. But she felt restless, like she was meant for something more. She started swimming every morning before work, just swimming in the calm water near shore, building her strength and confidence. The first time she put her face underwater and opened her eyes, seeing the fish and rocks below, she felt a surge of joy so powerful it brought tears. She visited Stefano's dive shop. They talked for hours about diving, about equipment, about the underwater sites around Porto Marina. Stefano suggested a refresher course. Just to see if you are interested, he said. No pressure, no commitment, just dip your toes back in the water, so to speak. Nancy agreed. They started with pool sessions, practicing basic skills. Nancy's muscle memory kicked in immediately. Her body remembered what to do. Clearing her mask, equalizing pressure, controlling buoyancy, breathing calmly from the regulator. After 3 pool sessions, they moved to open water. A calm bay, just 6 meters deep, crystal clear visibility. As Nancy descended, she felt the old panic stir. But she used her techniques, acknowledged the fear, breathed through it. And the panic faded. The underwater world opened up around her. Fish, rocks, seagrass waving in gentle current, beauty, peace, freedom. When she surfaced, she was crying and laughing at the same time. I can do this, she told Stefano. I can actually do this again. One evening, Nancy received a video call from Dr. Vasquez. The archaeologist looked excited, her eyes bright. Nancy, I have a proposition for you, Dr. Vasquez said without preamble. I am organizing a summer research expedition to Tunisia. We will be documenting underwater Phoenician ruins, ancient shipwrecks and structures that have been beneath the waves for over 2,000 years. We need skilled divers who can work carefully and methodically, divers who can handle challenging conditions but who understand the importance of preservation. I thought of you immediately. Nancy's heart raced. An expedition, real diving work, using her skills for research and discovery. I do not know if I am ready, Nancy said honestly. The rescue was an emergency, adrenaline, life or death. But daily diving work, I do not know if I can handle that yet. No pressure, Dr. Vasquez said quickly. The expedition is not until July. That gives you 3 months to prepare, to practice, to decide if this is something you want. But Nancy, I have seen you dive. I have worked with you. You are exceptional. Calm under pressure, strong, skilled. You would be perfect for this kind of work. Let me think about it, Nancy said. Can I tell you in a few weeks? Take all the time you need, Dr. Vasquez said. But I hope you say yes. The world needs divers like you, and I think you need this too. After the call, Nancy sat for a long time thinking. Archaeological diving, not rescue work, not high-stress emergencies, just exploration and documentation. Using her skills to preserve history and make discoveries. It excited her, terrified her, intrigued her. She called Marco the next day. They talked for over an hour, catching up, reminiscing. Finally, Nancy told him about Dr. Vasquez's offer. What do you think? She asked. Am I crazy to consider this? Am I ready? Marco was quiet for a moment. Only you can answer that, he said finally. But I will say this. You dove into a capsized boat multiple times to save people. You faced your worst fear and won. If you can do that, you can do anything. The question is not whether you are capable. The question is whether this is what you want. I think it is, Nancy said slowly. I think I want to dive again. Not rescue work, at least not yet, but exploration, discovery, using my skills for something meaningful. Then do it, Marco said firmly. Do not let fear hold you back. You have already proven you are stronger than your fear. Nancy made her decision. She called Dr. Vasquez and said yes. The next 3 months were a whirlwind of preparation. Nancy trained intensively with Stefano, doing progressively deeper and more challenging dives. She studied archaeological documentation techniques. She learned underwater photography. She built her physical fitness back to professional levels. She also gave her notice at the hotel. Sophia understood completely. You were meant for bigger things than carrying luggage, Sophia said, hugging her tight. But you will always have a home here. Come back and visit. Often. In July, Nancy flew to Tunisia to join the expedition. The team was wonderful. Dr. Vasquez was there, of course, along with several other archaeologists and divers from different countries. They lived on a research vessel for 6 weeks, diving every day. The first few dives were difficult. Nancy felt anxiety. She had to use all her coping techniques. But each dive got easier. By the end of the first week, she was diving confidently, documenting ancient structures, taking photographs, working as part of the team. The underwater ruins were breathtaking. Stone columns covered in coral, amphora scattered across the seabed, the remains of ships that had sunk 2,000 years ago. Nancy spent her days swimming through history, touching stones that ancient hands had shaped, imagining the people who had used these objects. One evening, sitting on the deck of the research vessel watching the sunset, Dr. Vasquez sat down beside Nancy. "You are doing great work," she said. "Really exceptional documentation. But more than that, you seem happy, at peace." "I am," Nancy said, surprised to realize it was completely true. "I am doing what I was meant to do, using my skills for something meaningful. I am not just surviving anymore. I am living." The expedition was a success. They documented important archaeological sites. They made discoveries that would contribute to understanding of ancient trade and culture. And Nancy proved to herself that she could dive professionally again. After the expedition, Nancy did not return to Porto Marina immediately. She went to see Marco. He had been developing a trauma recovery program for divers, similar to programs for military veterans with PTSD. "I want you to help me with this," Marco said. "You understand trauma from the inside. You understand recovery. You could help so many divers who are struggling like you struggled." Nancy agreed. She started working with Marco, helping to develop the program. They would teach divers with trauma how to manage anxiety, how to rebuild confidence, how to return to diving if they wanted to. The first class had 8 students, all divers who had experienced traumatic events, equipment failures, near drowning, witnessing deaths, each with their own pain and fear. Nancy told them her story, all of it. The accident, the trauma, the years of fear, the rescue that forced her to be brave, the slow rebuilding of confidence. "I am not going to tell you that recovery is easy," Nancy said, "or that you will go back to exactly who you were before. Trauma changes us, but it does not have to destroy us. You can build something new, something maybe even stronger than before." Over 8 weeks, Nancy worked with the students, pool sessions, open water dives, gradually building skills and confidence. It was hard work. There were tears, there were panic attacks, but there was also progress, growth, healing. By the end of the program, all 8 students completed successful open water dives. Nancy watched them surface, saw the joy and relief on their faces, and felt a deep sense of purpose. This was her calling now. Not just diving, but helping others heal, helping traumatized divers find their way back to something they loved. 5 years later, Nancy Rodriguez stood at the edge of the boat, looking down into blue water. She was 47 now, 5 years past her accident, 7 years since she first arrived in Porto Marina broken and afraid. So much had changed. "Ready?" asked Elena, her dive buddy for today. Elena was a young diver Nancy was training, the latest student in the trauma recovery program. "Ready," Nancy confirmed. They rolled backward into the water together. Nancy now ran the trauma recovery program full-time with Marco. They had trained over 300 divers in 5 years, helping them overcome trauma and return to diving. The program had expanded across Europe, with trained instructors in Italy, France, Spain, and Greece. Nancy still did archaeological diving with Dr. Vasquez, 2 or 3 expeditions per year. Greece, Turkey, Egypt. Each expedition brought new discoveries and adventures. She also worked as a consultant for diving organizations, helping develop trauma protocols and support systems. Several rescue diving companies now had mandatory trauma support programs because of Nancy's advocacy. Nancy had written a book, Second Chance: A Diver's Journey Through Trauma and Recovery. It had been published a year ago and was selling well, especially within the diving community. She received letters almost daily from people thanking her for sharing her story. Her personal life had blossomed too. She was in a relationship with Jean-Pierre, the French archaeologist she had met on expeditions. They lived together in northern Italy, near Marco's training facility. Jean-Pierre understood her work and her commitment to helping traumatized divers. Nancy still had occasional anxiety around diving. Probably she always would, but it no longer controlled her life. It was just part of who she was now. Today's dive was Elena's final test. Elena had experienced equipment failure 2 years ago that left her with severe diving anxiety. She had spent months in the trauma recovery program, slowly rebuilding confidence. This was her first deep dive since her accident. 15 meters, calm conditions, perfect visibility. For Elena, it was a huge achievement. Nancy stayed close as they descended, watching for signs of panic. But Elena was doing great. Her breathing was controlled. Her movements were smooth. At 15 meters, they paused and floated, looking around. Small fish darted past. Sunlight filtered through the water, creating beautiful patterns. It was peaceful and beautiful. Nancy saw Elena's eyes behind her mask, wide with wonder, with joy, with the rediscovery of why she had fallen in love with diving. After 20 minutes, they ascended slowly and surfaced. Elena pulled off her mask, tears streaming down her face. "I did it," Elena said through tears. "I actually did it. I dove again." "You did," Nancy confirmed, pulling her into a hug. "You were amazing. You should be so proud." "I could not have done it without you," Elena said. "Without your story showing me recovery was possible." Nancy smiled. "You did the hard work. I just showed you the way." Later that day, Nancy sat with Marco on the dock, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. "Another successful recovery," Marco said with satisfaction. "That is 342 divers we have helped now." 342 lives changed, Nancy corrected. 342 people who thought diving was lost to them forever, now back in the water. "All because you were brave enough to face your own trauma," Marco said. "All because you proved recovery was possible." Nancy thought about this. "You know what I realized recently? I am grateful for my accident." Marco looked surprised. "Grateful?" "Not grateful that it happened," Nancy clarified quickly, "but grateful for what it taught me. Before my accident, I was a good diver, skilled, successful. But I was also arrogant. I thought I was invincible. I took risks because I did not truly understand the danger. I did not have empathy for people who struggled or were afraid." She paused, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. "My accident taught me humility. It taught me to respect the water, to understand my limitations, to value safety over ego. It taught me empathy for people who struggle, who are afraid, who need help, and it gave me a mission that is more meaningful than anything I did before. I am not just saving lives in moments of crisis anymore. I am helping people reclaim their entire lives. That is a gift, Marco. A gift that came from my trauma." Marco nodded slowly. "You have taken something terrible and transformed it into something beautiful. That is remarkable. That is survival," Nancy said. Real survival. Not just living through the terrible moment, but finding meaning afterward. Building something worthwhile from the wreckage. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set. Nancy felt content. Her life was full and meaningful. She was helping people. She was doing work she loved. She had turned her trauma into her greatest strength. Nancy Rodriguez, once broken by fear, was now whole. Not unchanged, but changed for the better. Stronger, wiser, more compassionate. She had survived the darkness and found light. And every day, she helped others do the same. The stars began to appear overhead, the same stars that had watched over ancient civilizations, whose ruins Nancy explored. The same stars that had seen countless human struggles and triumphs. Nancy stood and stretched, ready to head home. Tomorrow she would teach another class. Next week she would speak at a diving conference. Next month she would join an expedition to explore underwater ruins in Sicily. Life was full and rich and beautiful. She had been given a second chance, and she was living it fully, not wasting a single moment. Nancy walked up the dock toward home, toward Jean-Pierre, toward dinner and conversation and plans for the future. The water lapped gently against the boats. The evening air smelled of salt and possibility. Behind her, the sea that had nearly killed her. The sea that had terrified her. The sea that she had learned to love again. The sea that had taught her the most important lesson. Trauma does not have to be the end of the story. It can be the beginning of something even better. Nancy smiled as she walked, thinking about Elena and all the other students she would help in the years to come. Thinking about the expeditions and discoveries waiting in her future. Thinking about the life she had built from the wreckage of her accident. She had survived. She had healed. She had found purpose. And that, Nancy thought, was enough. More than enough. It was everything. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We'd love to hear what inspired you the most. And where in the world are you watching from? Let us know below.